Hey everyone, you are going to want to jump to about the 10-minute point. It is about 10 minutes before class is going to start. Hey, Siham, I'm going to give everyone another minute or so to see if anyone comes in a minute later, so then I'm going to get started. There we go. Okay, everyone. I'm going to start talking as people come in. Let's just, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to pull it up on share screen, but I'm just going to take a look at the syllabus to see if there's anything we really need to be thinking about right now. Well, no, actually, let's look at that. Let's look at the announcements, because that's where I put the updated schedule for the course, if you remember. I posted this, and I'm going to pin that, actually, is what I'm going to do. See if I can do it. Nah, I can't do it. Whatever. I'll see if I can do it later. Anyway, please remember that I have updated our schedule. This week is week 12, and that is similar to what was on the schedule. We are going to be talking about domestic abuse today. No, actually, that's incorrect. We're going to talk about sexual assault today. So this is an intensely tough and triggering topic. If you are watching the recording while we're doing this, feel free to pause and start and stop and come back as you need to. I actually, while I was writing this stuff, had to take a couple walks because it is really hard stuff. And then next week is week 13. We are going to be having a live lecture. I believe we were originally planned for next week to be a reading catch-up week, but as I mentioned last week, I am going to be having my second COVID shot on April 20th, so I don't want to, and that's going to be happening around noon. So if I do get sick because of it, I will be getting sick in time for class. So I decided it was in our best interest to shift that stuff around. So we're going to have a lecture next week, which is week 13, starting April 12th, and then we will have a reading catch-up day on April 20th. Remember, during those reading catch-up days, reading catch-up weeks, we are reading 3 chapters. Chapter 14, 15, and 16 is what we're reading. And then week 15 is our finals week. So actually next week will be our last full lecture class. On Tuesday, April 27th, we will be doing a study session, and I will get you your study guides likely sometime during week 14, maybe a little bit sooner if possible. Basically, I can start putting the study guides together as soon as I'm done putting together the lecture for next week. And then the final will open on, it will open on Monday. I suggest that you wait until our study session on Tuesday to actually take it. And please note that the final is going to be due on Friday, April 30th, not Sunday. We bumped that stuff forward during finals week, mainly because of university deadlines and that sort of stuff to make sure all the stuff gets in and processed. So unlike other assignments, your final stuff is due on Friday. I think that's all as far as syllabus-ish type stuff. I am going to see, I'm pretty sure I can do it if I can pin that updated schedule to the top of the announcements. And if I can't do that, I'll probably put that in a clearer, more obvious place. Anyway, though, are there any questions from the people that are here live about anything? No? Okay. You may also notice, if you pulled up the slides, that the slides look a little bit different this week. I really figured, as far as style goes, simple, super simple is best with this subject. Using relatively few pictures is best with the subject of sexual assault, because it's a super hard, super delicate topic. So we're not doing the story times for this week or next week. Again, similarly, because these are topics that are key and core to family. We hope they never happen, domestic abuse or sexual assault. But much of the work of social workers, much of the work of teachers are all, this stuff exists and this stuff happens. So we have to be braced that it might happen with the hope that it never does. With that said, I am going to move in to the screen share. Remember, unfortunately, because of my current screen setup, I will not be able to see you or the chat during screen share. So if anything really needs to happen, please turn on your mic and let me know. So here I go. Let's see if Collaborate Ultra cooperates today. Okay, we'll see what happens. Okay, so this is lecture 9.1, sexual assault. I'm going to move stuff a little bit just so I can see, as part of our Sociology of Family Diversity course. We're doing a story time this week. We're going to talk about why we study this topic, because it is a super rough topic, and we're going to talk about why we do need to study this stuff relating to families and the sociology of families. We're going to talk about topics related to sexual violence. We will talk about patterns in sexual violence, very much taking a criminology type approach. If you aren't super familiar with criminology, it is a sub-discipline of sociology, and it is super helpful in understanding these kinds of terrifying human behaviors. Then we will talk about a little bit what we can do to stop sexual violence, because I do feel it's very important when you are addressing a horrible subject to give people like, oh, you don't like this? This is what you can do. And then we'll talk about the stuff that's due this week. Our content warnings are pretty obvious. We are talking about sexual assault, including rape, and we are going to be talking about child molestation. Next week, we will also address these topics a little bit, but next week's stuff will be mostly physical violence as far as triggering stuff, a little bit of psychological violence. But I do think it's good we are addressing these topics. So this topic is admittedly intensely uncomfortable, especially if you're not used to kind of the clinical social scientist mindset, the way I guess I am. Sexual assault and domestic abuse are both incredibly damaging crimes. There's domestic sexual assault and rape are both crimes that are said to be the most violent crime that somebody can survive. We can't always control what we are and or are not sexually aroused by too. That's another element of what makes this difficult. And both of those tie into a concept known as rape culture. Unfortunately, part of what encourages some people with problems to committing sex crimes is the same stuff that is arousing for some people, and some entirely good, totally fine people. This lecture is not intended to pass judgment on your individual sexual fantasies. Our individual sexuality is based on our personal psychologies and experiences in society. Your fantasies are between you and the people you have consensual sex with. I have a dear friend who died last year that taught a human sexuality course at OSU main campus, and she always said that your sex can be as rough as you want it to be, as long as everyone's okay with it and you talked about it and all that kind of thing. Anita was a real good lady. Consensual sex, let's define this. Consensual sex is defined as a sex act in which all parties are enthusiastically engaged in. We're going to address that a little bit at the end of this lecture because you can't go through a lecture like this and not think, oh my God, have I always had full consent and everything? That's a natural thought to think in this stuff. So we'll give you some things to make you feel a little bit more confident in that terrifying question. Also, according to the law of the state of Ohio, people under the age of 16 cannot grant sexual consent. This is especially true between adults, defined as people over the age of 18, and minors. This is, it's really a matter of, it's a matter of power dynamics. It absolutely is a matter of power dynamics. So a teacher has an intense power dynamic over a student, even if those people are the same age. Additionally, it is a matter of intellectual maturity and intellectual development. An adult who is in their mid-20s or 30s has an amazing capacity of deception when compared to someone like a 13-year-old. They simply know more, and their brains are wired to be more clinical and from kind of a evil sense to be more manipulative in that way. Additionally, consensual problems can happen when one child and another child interact with each other, and one of those children has a mental disability. That also falls into the realm of sexual abuse. When two children under the age of 16 engage in a consensual act, that may be a matter that social workers may look into, but it's something altogether different. And that is something that you likely would talk about in a social work type course, if, say, you would go get your master's degree in social work. So men and everyone else are definitely in our society getting better in terms of sexual assault and in terms of family violence. These are things that we have made tremendous inroads in our society about. However, these problems are still present in our society. And as with many things, public education, as in just defining it, and public conversations and courses like this one are something that helps society get better. But that stuff is not the only solution. That's not all we can do, but there is a powerful tool to be used in terms of stopping sexual assault. Here we see a pretty good example of what was considered hilarious in the 1950s. We have one business person saying to another business person, "Say I'd like to borrow Miss Smith for a while," implying that, well, first of all, Miss Smith is unmarried because she's a miss. Second, she's some sort of sexual plaything of these older men that work in the office. And you know, at one time, it was more like we were more likely linguistically to say, "Can I borrow you?" Now I'm pretty sure that phrase is going out of our lexicon, probably for a good reason, because it does imply kind of ownership of other people. And I was looking through, and this was about the most usable visual example of, I just put in crude humor from the 1950s and office humor, and this is one of the least sexualized ones. Again, I make reference back to Mad Men. Maybe in future versions of the class I might show pieces of Mad Men. We've come a long way as a society, thank goodness. So this slide is slightly off. Well, no. What's happening here? Oh, no. This was the disclaimers. Now we're going to talk about why we study this topic. So, as I mentioned, rape is said to be the most violent crime that a victim survives. Sexual crimes are surrounded by a host of very strange and disturbing phenomena. So, not only is this a crime that we want to stop in our society, but there are what social scientists would call interesting, other people would call deeply disturbing phenomena that surround sex crimes. This is part of the reason why Law and Order SVU is an intensely popular show, right? And it's been on the air for like 30 years, is because there is definitely something to this terrifying thing. Additionally, if we don't like something that exists in society, it is kind of our duty as academics to study it in order to prevent future incidents and to destigmatize the victims of sex crimes itself. Additionally, many people who work with kids, as in the people that would take a sociology of family course, are mandated reporters. Mandated reporters are defined as people who are required by law to report potential cases of child or elder abuse. Now, anyone can report a case of child or elder abuse. Any person, any citizen, or even non-citizen can report that stuff. But mandated reporters, if they see what they perceive as evidence of abuse, they are required by law to report this stuff. I put here a screen capture from the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, including the 1-800 number that you can call, just in case. I mean, if when I take courses, for example, I always save all of the slides for the course, just like you might keep a hold of a book, just in case you might need that stuff in the future. So if that's something you do, if ever you go into a field working with kids and you think you might need this information in the future, there it is. Hypothetically, you'll be able to find it. So people who are mandated reporters include, and let's work through this list because it might not be obvious why attorneys, audiologists, those are ear doctors, child care workers, children's service personnel, clergy, coroners, daycare personnel, dentists, foster parents, nurses, physicians, podiatrists, foot doctors, that's interesting, psychiatrists, all school employees across the board, social workers, speech pathologists, and also animal control officers. All of these people are people that potentially could come in contact with people as a course of their profession in a relatively intimate situation come into their house, meet people in their houses, or have a reason to go into a house, as with the animal control person. And having exposure to that. Honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that plumbers and technicians and electricians aren't also on this list, because those are also people that go into residences. But I'm assuming because plumbers and electricians are not necessarily trained in this stuff. Yeah, so that's really the reason there. Additionally, dentists don't necessarily go into a house, but dentistry is one of those people that even if you do isolate people, even if you have a horrible, very abusive person controlling people in their family, they are likely to go to the dentist and take them to the dentist if they have like a tooth rotting out of their head or something. So these are our mandated reporters. So if you're planning on going into one of these fields, be aware that if you see what you think may be abuse, you have to report it. Additionally, most of these disciplines have continuing education associated with them, and there are required trainings for mandated reporters to know what you're looking at, because a lot of the injuries associated with child abuse that we aren't getting into today, a lot of those injuries are semi-unique to a big grown adult attacking for example, a small child, and also in the case of domestic abuse as well, in terms of abusing an adult. So, what information do mandated reporters report? They report the name and address of a child, the age of the child, the name and address of parents or caretakers, the name of parents you suspect being abusing. That's important, right? If there are two parents, then you need to know which one is the abusive one, and maybe both of them are, but usually it's just one. Keep in mind, even though today's topic is sexual assault, there is some layover between domestic abuse and sexual assault. So this content right here applies to both this week's material and next week's material. Any other information you think might be helpful? And mandated reporters are also have the option of reporting anonymously as well. The agency won't give your name. And all of this is actually taken directly from the state of Ohio's website, because I felt it was the most accurate. It's when I say it's good to use a direct quote is when the actual wording is the best possible wording. So what happens if that report is made? Well, let's say you're a social worker in a school and you decide to make a report. Well, first, a Child Protective Services investigator will interview the child, the family members, and others as they deem appropriate. I actually, I did a couple internships when I was in college, and one of the internships I did was with Child Family Services, and you know, I was young and not really paying attention and didn't get much out of that internship. I really wish I had gotten more out of it. But one of the things I got was ride-alongs when interviews like this were happening. And it was pretty eye-opening. It showed situations in which maybe families were having some problems that people could help out with. Maybe stressful family situations, but also it showed me very clear-cut situations where intensely bad things were happening, and really what the difference between those two things are. And anyone with experience in the field can often often those very bad situations too. But it's hard to know every time, but it is a sense that develops. That, of course, real evidence has to be backed up too. Second, then, the investigator determines if the child is being abused or is at risk for being abused. The concept of being at risk is incredibly important for criminologists and also important for social workers or anyone else that deals with children or vulnerable population. The concept of being at risk for abuse, maybe it's not happening yet. You can't necessarily take kids away if they're at risk for abuse, but you can say, for example, we're going to come visit you again in 6 months just to make sure everything's okay. That's something that can be done. And then the case may be referred then to local social service agencies or to juvenile, family, or criminal court. Sorry, the commas are slightly unclear right here. Juvenile court's its own thing, family court's its own thing, and criminal court's its own thing. Didn't use my good Oxford comma there. So let's talk before we really get into what's commonly known as profiling and trends in sexual violence, let's talk about some concepts that are related to sexual violence. So when compared to other types of criminals, murderers, terrorists, thieves, etc., rapists are pretty hard to profile. It is generally agreed, though, that serial rapists are relatively easy to profile. So I probably could have worded that a little bit better. So we're making the difference here between serial rapists and incidental rapists. A serial rapist is someone who, due to their personal psychological makeup or due to their life experience or whatever, for some reason chooses to sexually assault repeatedly people. A incidental rapist is somebody who may have raped someone, but due to rape culture, which we'll talk about, may not even realize or acknowledge that it was a rape, right? They might say, oh, that was bad sex, or oh, that person was just weird, I never saw them again, and not even necessarily recognize the rape. That's a super troubling element of the phenomena of rape that is present in our society that we'll talk a little bit more. Let me just, excuse me, please. I'm gonna fly through my slides just to make sure I didn't miss something. Okay, good. I'm going to talk very specifically about the concept of rape culture because it is very important for understanding the phenomena of rape, especially by incidental rapists. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So feminist theory blames rape on gender inequality. And this is especially something that was covered extensively by second wave feminists. This is why then we can't profile incidental rapists, because effectively the argument that is being made here is society is structured in a way that allows for people for quote accidental rape to happen. It's not accidental, it's absolutely not accidental. But those rapes that aren't necessarily acknowledged by the people doing it, that sort of stuff. And it's that social situation, unfortunately, that was allowed to continue for decades in our society that really kept us from digging in and trying to combat the phenomena of rape. Here we have a picture of an event, a type of event called a Take Back the Night event. These, I believe, have been occurring since the 1970s. They still do occur on college campuses, again, in not COVID times, where women, usually it's mostly women and their allies. Sometimes it's only women, and those are the rules. Sometimes men are allowed to participate too, almost always non-men, so trans women, trans men are also allowed to participate in this sort of thing. We'll talk about trans people relating to these concepts a little bit later in the lecture too. But a Take Back the Night event is basically about taking back the ability of women and other people, non-cis men basically, to be able to go out at night, take it back, all that sort of stuff. They're really good, empowering events from what I've known. I've always stayed away from them, namely because I haven't really felt it's my place as a cis man to go to a Take Back the Night event, but everyone I've known that has gone to them has said they're really pretty cool. So some of this information in this presentation is provided by an organization called RAIN. RAIN is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. It is a super good resource for sexual assault survivors and people who want to understand sexual assault. You can just Google search RAIN, or you can call their hotline there. And this specific website, online.rain.org, is you can chat with someone directly right now. So that's a good resource in the modern era too, especially for people who are being abused, because a lot of times people who are being abused can't talk in their house, but they can maybe send text messages. So that can also be a potentially good resource. There is a super good article defining sexual assault by RAIN, but this is the quick and brief definition. The term sexual assault refers to sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent of the victim. So some forms of sexual assault include, so these are some of the forms of sexual assault, but not all defined definitions of sexual assault. A big problem also we've had in trying to stop sexual assault is people saying, well, this is sexual assault and this isn't sexual assault. So whenever defining these things, we try not to get too specific because there's all kinds of ways sexual assault can happen. Attempted rape is sexual assault. Fondling or unwanted sexual touching is sexual assault. Forcing a victim to perform sex acts such as oral sex or penetrating any part of the perpetrator's body. So forcing somebody to put anything into the person that is doing the sexual assault, that is also sexual assault. And then, sorry, I just had a kid scream upstairs, but mom's going in to take care of it. Okay. Additionally, penetrating of the victim's body, that is sexual assault, and that is the definition of rape. And that is defined in the following slides as far as the legal definition of rape. There is so much history right here in trying to help victims of sexual assault because, again, arguments over, well, this is rape and this isn't rape, and then taking efforts for people to actually take it seriously. There is just a very long, very painful history of that there. Unfortunately, the way, I don't know, it's so hard to tell. The way we punish these things in our society is that we punish rape more than these other forms of sexual assault. That's not a judgment call. That's just kind of how the laws are laid out. But certainly these other forms of sexual assault can be just as traumatizing as actual rape can be. Traditionally, informally, definitions of rape have been intensely heteronormative. I don't remember if I've actually defined heteronormative in this course, so I'm doing it now. Heteronormative is defined as when we assume that everyone is heterosexual and that being heterosexual is, quote, the quote, normal way to be sexual. I think I've discussed this already in this course. There's no normal way to do sex. There's no standard way to do sex. There might be more common ways to do sex, but there's no normal way to do it. These definitions, these heteronormative definitions of sex, often see rape as forced entry of a vagina by a penis when perpetrated by a man against a woman who is not his wife. And that is a really messed up definition of rape because it defines all other forms of sexual violence as something else, as just something else that isn't rape. Rape is the big bad one that's totally illegal, and then these other things are other things. It is not uncommon for people to incorrectly believe, and this is a very hopefully going away idea, that a man cannot rape his wife. And I have actually had arguments with students in this regard. The first time I ever actually heard someone say this, I just was kind of dumbstruck and didn't really even know what to say. And that's a good reason why we study these things too, so that when clearly troubling ideas come up, we know how to address them. When one spouse rapes another spouse, that's called marital rape. That's what that's called. It's a very specific crime, and you can not only can spouses rape each other, but in a court of law, someone can absolutely go to prison for raping their spouse, and rightfully so. However, as I mentioned, despite those traditional definitions of rape, the official legal definitions of rape are very, very concrete. Rape is defined as a form of sexual assault, but not all sexual assault is rape. The FBI specifically defines rape as penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any part or body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. The without the consent of the victim is the huge part right there in terms of that legal definition. To see how any state defines rape legally and other forms of sexual assault, you can go to RAIN's state law database. And that is a really good resource, especially for an aspiring attorney or law enforcement person, or simply a really anyone. Here's the bit about rape culture, and this is where things get really hard to deal with. Rape culture is defined as elements in a society that encourage rape and excuse people who rape. Many elements of rape culture appear to be innocent or appear to be, quote, not that bad because they're part of our everyday lives. But once we start examining these things, once we start to kind of pull away the facade of society, it reveals intensely uncomfortable questions. So just putting this image here, and this is actually from a lingerie website, like this is clearly a outfit that someone would wear for the purpose of some sort of sex act, right? And this is an attractive woman. This is a woman who's a fully grown woman, but she's dressed up in a schoolgirl uniform, right? And that concept that we have that exists in our society of the sexy schoolgirl, that's one of many really troubling elements in our society that contribute to rape culture. Now, am I saying that if you have that sexual fantasy, you're going to rape someone? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all. But for those people that are inclined to commit acts of sexual violence, this stuff is something that they feed off of, right? This is something that may potentially encourage them. Additionally, elements of rape culture include the sexual objectification of women and girls. So I'll talk about sexual objectification a little bit. Other elements of rape culture include double standards and dress codes. These personally drive me crazy. I'll get very super specific with this. In my high school, and I sometimes hear about high schools with similar dress codes, and this was especially true before yoga pants became very much part of how everyone dresses. In my high school, though, wearing yoga pants was absolutely forbidden in the schools as pants. And why were they forbidden? Well, because they were seen as being too form-fitting, and that the boys would have trouble concentrating. So it was the girls' fault for wanting to dress this way in the clothes that were for sale in the store, because it would make the boys too aroused. That sounds like a boys' problem. It doesn't sound like a problem the girls are doing, right? And similarly, a boy wearing tight pants probably would never bat an eye of most school officials. And I'm sure if you went to a public high school, or maybe a not public high school, you heard of similar things in your high school as well. You honestly, unfortunately, see it in most high school dress codes. And actually, it's one of the reasons why dress codes are, and maybe uniforms are, a good alternative potentially in high schools to maybe get rid of some of that. But then also we have that damn schoolgirl uniform fetish thing, right? So it's very much a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. Additionally, these myths of boys will be boys, right? Boys can just do whatever the hell they want because boys will be boys. Young men should be able to go out and sow their wild oats. That's particularly gross saying, especially when you start picking it apart and thinking about both the agriculture element of it and the sexuality implications there. And of course, my mother would say, I think you're reading a little too far into it. And I would say, I'm absolutely not. This is what social scientific analysis looks like. And then also dismissing when rape allegations occur, people will often say things like, well, she shouldn't have dressed like that. Well, maybe the person shouldn't have raped, right? Or committed sexual assault. Additionally, other elements of our rape culture, we see this in the literal stories we tell children, not just the things that we call myths and superstition, or like these are in the stories. Walt Disney's version of Snow White is actually a very old European folktale. Many of that first 3 or 4 of the original Disney princesses, those were almost directly pulled from Grimm's fairy tales. And in Grimm's fairy tales, Snow White, it is problematic that Prince Charming brings Snow White back to life by kissing her when she was unconscious, right? That's one thing. Kissing someone when they're unconscious and you've never met them, that definitely is something that you could categorize as rape culture. However, if you look at some of the variations of the Snow White story, and because these are folk tales, there are many, many variations. In one version of the Snow White story, and this is probably one much older version, Prince Charming kisses Snow White. She does not wake up, but she gives birth to a child, and that after the child is born, she wakes up. And it's a very short step to think, well, did he kiss her when she was sleeping, or did he impregnate her when she was sleeping? It's deeply, deeply disturbing. It's really a messed up element of our culture, of our history, of our folk tales, that if we want to get to the roots of these things, we have to dig there. We have to look there and not look away when something is difficult. Some legal structures and tradition in our society support that notion of women being men's property. And if you've, over the course of this class, kind of developed a taste for what is second wave feminism and what is third wave feminism, this is very much second wave kind of ideas. Giving away the idea of giving away the bride. Now, my father-in-law did the whole giving away the bride at my wedding. I'm not sure if my wife would have been all about that if we would get remarried today, but it's a very traditional part of weddings. And most people, if you're married, the bride was probably given away. We don't think a second thought about this stuff. There are many traditional beliefs based on culture or religion that people actually, those beliefs of subservience to the husband, that really can, when taken to the extreme form, fall into that idea of women as property. Tendencies, this is something that really makes my wife very angry. Tendencies for men to be listed on deeds and titles rather than women. The car that my wife drives, when we were doing the paperwork, and if you've never bought a car at a dealership, the paperwork's absolutely exhausting and you just want the damn thing to be over, right? Well, the person that sold us the car put my information in and didn't put my wife's information in. And you can have two people on a car title, but it just put mine in. And that has rubbed my wife wrong, rightfully so, that the car she drives is titled under my name as if I'm letting her drive the car, even though most of the money that went toward the car was her money, right? That's an aggravating point. And then also this is tied in with the cultural tradition of women changing their names when getting married. Now, given I'm specifically talking about European traditions of changing names, there are some Middle Eastern and Muslim traditions that also go with changing names. I'm specifically talking about the European Christian-oriented ideas of a woman taking the last name of her husband. And this, I can speak to this directly as of like last year. My sister-in-law did not take my brother's last name. And to this day, it was only a year ago, but like there are people in my family that are pissed about that. So that was something, let me tell you. Awkward conversations. So, and then pornography. Some pornography does reinforce rape culture. Now, given our multimedia society, given the isolation of the last year, pornography isn't what it used to be. Pornography is part of a lot of people's sexuality. I don't like to say most when we talk about people's sexuality because it implies what is normal and isn't normal. But a lot of people, pornography is part of their sexuality. Some pornography is definitely more problematic than other pornography, namely pornography with coercive plots. Where even if the people in the pornography are doing it consensually, it's implied that it's not consensual. That is problematic. Not to say that it's always terrible, but it is part of rape culture. Revenge porn, that's definitely terrible, right? There are specific websites and specific sharing sites on the internet where it's usually men go on and they share naked images of their former partners in an effort to punish them. That's unconscionable across the board. Another thing that is, well, I'm going to say gross. I'm probably going to say gross there. Barely legal porn, where they say, well, they're barely 18. That is something that also reinforces rape culture. It's definitely something that encourages us, at least maybe even usually subconsciously, to look at people who are under the age of 18 as somehow that forbidden fruit concept. Now, pornography is an industry. There's a lot of people involved in the pornography industry. It's a big part of our economy. And there are a lot of people involved with it. With a lot of people involved with it, there are some good actors, good forces, people, I'll just say good people, and some bad people. A lot of the good people who are trying to stop these elements of rape culture are trying to remedy these old problematic plots. A big part of what some people think is a solution for this, while maintaining that pornography is part of modern sexuality, is to get away from, as a society, free porn. So the site OnlyFans, and I know about OnlyFans mainly through, I don't know why I feel I have to say this, I know about it mainly through advertisements on podcasts, but OnlyFans is a site that pornographic actors, it's always interesting to know the right words, right? Because they're not necessarily workers, it's something else, right? They're pornographic actors. They can go on and do their pornographic thing, but make sure that only people that pay for it can see it. That then, it's thought, will help minimize those unscrupulous actors and people in the general pool of internet pornography, and discourage them from doing it in the future, potentially. It's a big problem that we don't really talk about in our society, because nobody really likes to talk about pornography viewing. It's a very interesting topic, very interesting indeed. But there are other elements of rape culture. The concept rape culture is a huge problem in our society. Many rapists hold the victim responsible for the rape. This additionally, it's used to justify the actions of the rapist. The victim blame then continues even after rape, with the rapist defining as, well, she wanted it, it's just bad sex, it's regrettable sex, that's what she's talking about. That's what a lot of these accounts often sound like. Rape culture encourages victims not to confront rapists. So not only is rape culture these cultural artifacts of sexy images and objectification and all that sort of thing, additionally, it is the responses that we are conditioned as people to think. So if somebody is raped, we generally encourage people to be ashamed of their sexuality in our society, and that might be something that the victim of a rape thinks. And if someone is ashamed of their sexuality and ashamed of their having been raped, then they are much less likely to actually confront their rapist and report their rapist. To the best of my knowledge, if there is something that's real in this regard that happens at Otterbein campus, the person that you should contact is Scott Fitzgerald, the Title IX coordinator and director of human resources. His phone number is here and his email address is there too. And if he's not the person you should contact in this regard, he will be able to pass that on to people who can help you. Double standards in sexuality are absolutely also part of rape culture and also patriarchy. We have these ideas in society that men who have sex with more women are seen as being more manly, while women who have sex with lots of men are seen as being easy, or the words sluts and whores are also used, right? So we use these, a man is supposed to have sex with lots of women, and a woman is not supposed to have sex with lots of men. And if you're thinking about this in strictly heteronormative terms, where only men have sex with women, which is something people think when they tend to hold these concepts in their brains, that math doesn't work out, right? Because we tend to think of that as a one-to-one sort of thing. Additionally, then, this leads us to the concept of the Madonna whore complex. This is a concept that was worked out in feminist theory in, I believe, the 1990s or so, maybe late 80s. It's the idea and the observation that women are encouraged to be at the same time both incredibly sexual and not sexual at all, right? Especially young women. It's and these things are, as with a lot of these things are passing over time, but it is something that exists in our society. Thus, all women are set up to fail by these standards, right? You can't be both of those things. They're almost opposite things, but we give women and girls these dual messages in all sorts of media in our society. It is a very dated reference. I'm not sure if teenage girls even still watch Grease, but a lot of my friends did. In Olivia Newton-John's depiction of the character Sandy in Grease, she is depicted both as this incredibly virginal, incredibly innocent character for most of the movie, and then she goes out with John Travolta's character, and then she becomes this highly sexualized character, and that's a happy ending to that movie. Somehow, it's if you really watch Grease and watch it for themes, even though it looks like a innocent PG, I think it's G movie, it's busted. Grease is busted. So let's look at patterns in sexual violence. Let me look at the time. I think this is a good pausing point to take a little break. Let's be back here at 7:02. Right now I have 6:56. So let's come back at 7:02. Okay, do what you have to do to walk around. Okay, it's 7:01. We'll start up again. Well, it's 7:02 according to my computer. I am just double checking now that everything is still working properly. Everything is still recording. Okay. So, are there any questions or anything for those of you that are here right now before I really get going again? No? Okay. I'm gonna get restarted again. So, fortunately, because we are actively engaged in studying this as a society now, criminologists have been able to identify many patterns in sexual violence. And this includes both incidental rapists and the deeply troubling category of serial rapists. And serial rapists, when compared to incidental rapists, absolutely have a very clear profile, which is some consolation that they can be caught. So, most of our knowledge of sexual violence comes to us from the discipline of criminology. Just defining that real quick, criminology is the social scientific study of crime, its causes, and its impacts on society. So a criminologist wants to study crime, and they study crime largely from the standpoint of what a sociologist would do. I'm gonna plug my computer in. Okay. Criminal justice people, then, and those who study criminal justice, that is the study of law enforcement, prosecution, and incarceration. So, criminal justice people want to stop crime, they don't want to study crime. And that distinction traditionally has led to conflicts between criminologists and criminal justice people. I've actually known people who have gotten in those academic type conflicts, but there is absolutely a distinction there. Obviously, society needs both of these types of people, but it is a area where professionals can get in conflict with each other. So much of this portion of the presentation is talking about general patterns in sexual violence, and then we will look at other patterns in other areas as well. So most rape and sexual violence occurs between acquaintances. Usually a sexual assaulter or a rapist will attack people that they know. The primary motive for prison rape is to humiliate a victim. That is a big thing in terms of that sort of rape. However, humiliation rape does occur in other settings as well. Rape is unfortunately common. In the United States, 22% of women ages 18 to 90 report having been forced to have sex at least once. Similar stats relating to both rape and sexual violence and sexual assault fuel much of the Me Too movement that we've talked about previously in this class. And that's what Me Too is all about, is someone saying, I too, well, not me, and I'm a male, I too have, this thing has happened too, right? That's part of that whole concept. Women are the most common victims of sexual assault. Non-gender conforming people are also targeted though. So this is where we have the concept of sexual objectification. That definition is the transformation of the image or body of a person from being a total person, as in a person with a personality, with feelings, and with attitudes that are taken into consideration, to being an object of sexual interest. And this is the most common criticism of pornography overall, is that it objectifies women usually. Additionally, though, both cisgender women and trans people are the most typical subjects of sexual objectification in our society. Now, that doesn't mean that men can't be sexually objectified. What it does mean, though, is that cis women and all trans people are more commonly thought of as sexual objects than cis men are. Sexual passion is typically not the motivation for sexual assault. Most sexual assault and most rape are perpetrated by people who are interested in punishing their victims and in not necessarily, maybe not even necessarily this victim, but women as a whole, right? Rape, the argument has been made that rape is inherently a sex crime. I don't know how much I buy into that necessarily, but definitely there is the element of the motivation of rape. Most rape is not about sexual passion. It's about hating women or hating whoever you are raping. Coercive rape then is the rape of a person as a form, not coercive, all rape is coercive. Corrective rape is the rape of a person as a form of punishment. And I alluded to this earlier in the presentation. This is or was somewhat more common in pre-industrial societies. So those societies that we currently consider to be third world or undeveloped, that this still does occur in some of those societies, and it is sometimes used as a justification when rapists talk about punishing people with rape. That is a motivation for rapists. Men are the most typical perpetrators of rape and sexual violence, and women are the most common victims, as I already said. Sorry, there's a little bit of repetitive material in these first two ones. The most common age of rape victims are the age of 16 to 20. That also alludes to kind of the more troubling elements of rape culture, that young age is also kind of in there. Rape and sexual assault does increase during summer months. This is a basic of the study of criminology, that most crime increases during summer months. This is mostly because there is more social interaction with other people during summer months. So when you're around other human beings, every human being you interact with, there's a very small chance that that could turn into a crime, right? So if you're just staying in your house all alone all the time, you are less likely to be the victim of a crime, at least of a stranger. Now, obviously, if the person you're afraid of is someone you live with, that's an entirely different thing. But in terms of general crime, that's the going rule. Rape most often occurs during the weekends. So that goes along with the summer rule of interacting with other human beings. And rape usually involves drinking on the part of offenders. So there's I lost my, anyway, there's a common misconception that people that get raped are always drinking. There is no real pattern in that regard. It can make someone more vulnerable, but one pattern we do see is that rapists themselves will drink basically to put themselves up to it, basically, unless they're a more seasoned and, a more experienced rapist, effectively. Most rapists do some planning before the actual attack. Rape is not typically a spur moment type of crime. Rapist often chooses their victims a victim who is vulnerable to attack. So The allusion to rapists as being predators is a pretty good one, and calling them predators, and the famous show To Catch a Predator, right? It's a good allusion. Rapists look for places that can be easily entered and are relatively physically safe, because remember, a rapist is inherently a selfish creature. Most rapists rely only on verbal coercion and non physical aggression. So, to get into the situation, the rapist may use verbal coercion or guilt or something like that. But at the point of attack, at the point that the rape is about to happen, that is when a rapist is most likely to actually use physical force. Most often, rape and sexual assault is not reported to the police. This is one of the very most difficult parts of stopping this type of crime. Rapes are typically committed by acquaintances, as I alluded to, and rapes often take place in the residence of either the victim or the offender. That's namely because rapes tend to take place where people have sex, right? Assailants are more likely to use verbal or psychological coercion. Again, sorry, there's a little bit of repetitive material here. Sorry about that. General patterns. Rape often involves the premeditation of sex, which leads to rape when the victim does not imply. What does that mean? There's a couple layers there. So in the instance of a serial rapist, this is the criminal thinking out the crime and the steps of the crime. In the instance of the incidental rapist, of the date rapist, it implies the date rapist assuming that sex will happen during this interaction, and then when sex doesn't happen, they make it happen, right? That's a very strong pattern we see across serial rapists and incidental rapists. In the past, rape has involved as many as 50% of all college students. That is especially troubling, as many colleges do not and have not traditionally punished rape seriously. Now, there has been very, very good progress in the last couple decades relating to rape and college campuses, but it is still absolutely something we have to take as being deadly serious, both literally and figuratively. You absolutely have to take rape seriously every time it comes up. The majority of rapes involve white people raping white people. This contradicts very older racial stereotypes that black men are more sexually dangerous than white men. So that's based in deeply rooted stereotypes of black people. But with that said, most crime involves white people attacking other white people, because we tend to interact with people of our own race more than we tend to interact with people of different races. That's kind of an element of how our society is structured, especially in more rural areas. Official statistics, though, and this is an area where sociologists are highly skeptical of official statistics. Official statistics indicate that black rapists tend to choose white victims. And when you pick that apart, though, it's very hard to tell based on these official statistics. But this may be a reflection on the fact that black men who rape white women are more likely to be charged by police, to be taken serious by police, than when black women are assaulted. It may be that police are less likely to take black women seriously, especially poor black women, So that statistic itself is it's kind of troubling, and I mean, all of these are troubling statistics, but that may indicate systemic racism on behalf of law enforcement. Men are the most Oh, yeah, the sense makes sense here. Okay. Men are the most common perpetrators of rape and sexual assault against men. So when men are raped, it's usually them being raped by other men. Nearly half of men who are raped by men know their victims as well. So in these instances, it very much reflects the rape of men and women. One half of victims of rape identify as being heterosexual. It goes across sexuality there. The rapist assaults them with the intent to punish or dominate. So we see some interesting sociological, social factors happening here. Because men who rape other men often identify themselves as being heterosexual. It's very interesting, and often they quote punish victims for perceived homosexuality on behalf of the victim. And when you read these accounts, a lot of it is, well, you're gay, I'll show you how gay you are. There is not a logic in these crimes here. Actually, in my hometown, there was a quote unquote tradition of hazing that occurred on behalf of, and there were stories about this in my hometown, but it only really became documented in the last couple years that my hometown basketball team basically there were hazing of younger members of the basketball team that absolutely are 100% defined as rape with an object, and thus also implying really messed up stuff. And unfortunately, it's everywhere. It's in our society, and we just need to be brave enough to actually look at it, because my hometown is not a place that is introspective and examines the things that are busted there. Part of why I don't live there anymore. Men can be raped by women. This is something that is often ignored by our society. Rape is about being an expression of power, right? Is not an expression of lust usually, is about an expression of power and domination. Men being involuntary penetrated anally by a penis or other object also classifies as rape. So there's this misconception that men can't be raped because, I think this is on my next slide. Yeah, there's a misconception that men can be raped because people often think that the only sex is penis vagina intercourse, right? The reality of the matter is, if somebody is entered involuntarily, that is rape. That also can include either the anus or the mouth. Physical reaction of the victim is inconsequential. So that misconception that men can't be raped, part of it is the belief that if a penis becomes erect, then that's not rape. Then that's being voluntary, right? Whether or not a penis becomes erect doesn't matter. And this is especially true, doubly true, if the male victim is either a minor or a person with a mental disability and not really held to be in full mental capacities, and especially by the court. This is the bit where it gets very legal, whether it is punishable or not, and this depends on jurisdiction. But if the victim is younger or a minor, that makes it easier to convict effectively in those cases. Rape is common in prison, and it is more so than man on woman rape outside of prison, or man on another person. And outside prison, there is less rape of men, especially by men. When men rape men, physical force is often used, especially in prison, and rape in prison involves force more often than rape out of prison. So a prison rape is usually a man against another man, and it usually is very forceful. That is kind of the definition of that specific form of rape. There is an ongoing concern relating to prison reform in stopping sexual violence in prison, right? And when we examine what is okay in society, and when we take a critical lens of the prison industrial complex, one of the things that is to be examined is whether rape is an expected part of the punishment experience in prisons. And if we look at it and we talk to people and talk about conversations we have about people and talk about people we know who went to prison that we think deserve to be in prison, these comments are often brought up. But according to the United Nations, this type of permitting rape to occur in prison is absolutely a violation of human rights across the board. And it's, again, so much of this topic is deeply troubling. Child molestation is a form of sexual assault, but child molestation is not typically classified as rape. And that will be made more clear in the following slides. Consent is irrelevant regarding minors. A child cannot grant consent. First of all, the victim is too young, and this impacts both intellectual maturity and power dynamics. Kids, just by the way they have been trained by society, will listen to people who are older to them. That's kind of one of the major problems of child psychology, even if the person shouldn't be listened to. In the state of Ohio, as I mentioned previously, anyone under the age of 16 cannot legally consent to sex. Most molesters are men, and girls are more likely than boys to be molested. However, society tends to pay more attention to accounts of boys being molested. This is likely due to deeply ingrained attitudes of homophobia in our society. Thus, the sexual violation of a child is somehow seen as being worse if it is done by a person of the same sex. Either way is absolutely terrifying, but somehow, if you add, these are deeply homophobic, basically. And this may also be due to patriarchal attitudes. So when women and girls are assaulted, it may be because they're viewed as being sexual property, but men are additionally occurs to be constantly sexual, right? So when a young teenage boy is assaulted by a grown woman, somehow people may say things like, well, good for that kid, right? No, it's rape is exactly what it is. That's rape, that's child molestation. It's not cool. Psychological profiling is relatively successful relating to child molesters when compared to other forms of criminals. The ability to profile, as I alluded to, absolutely depends on the crime. So serial killers have very, very specific profiles. Spousal abusers have actually almost no profile. So those are just examples of whether you can or can't profile certain groups. Molesters are typically unmarried. Sorry. Sorry, guys, something's happened. Okay, I think everything's working, guys. Kanan, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Great. Go.
So there, I'm not gonna like name any names or anything like that because I don't want to like
Sure.
these people are like married now and whatever, and this was a long time ago. But
Sure, if there's a lot that exists, yeah.
I know of a situation where there was a man who was a high school teacher here in Ohio, and he ended up marrying one of his students that he taught, and he was their coach in sports and stuff. And
Yep.
when that person's mom found out, they went to the school board and tried to get him fired. But the school board said since it was like a year after when they finally came out with their relationship, they couldn't do anything. Like, what are
Right.
the orders there? Because I know that when I heard about this, I think I was like 16 years old when all this happened.
Okay.
I was really,
So
it
this was
felt weird.
relatively recently.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, was this a rural place or a urban place?
Rural. It was out in the country.
Yeah. Attitudes like that tend to be more like what you just kind of said. When I was a teenager, it was kind of an ongoing thing that, yeah, this kind of stuff actually happened. And I can't remember. Yeah, these things do happen. And most high schools have these stories, but by the standards of today, especially, hopefully that will be one of the last cases of that in that school district. But I can guarantee by the history of that school district and by the history of the school district I went to that it happened. It absolutely happened in the past. I actually know of a band instructor in my high school that he was a couple years older than me, and he came back in a substitute fashion after I was done there, and he wound up dating one of the girls there. And by it's the power dynamic thing, right? And it's the age thing. Someone in their mid 20s is intellectually much more developed and able to manipulate than someone in their mid teens. So, like, I would say that students' parents were absolutely justified in trying to have the person fired, and they probably could have taken legal action, but I'm not a lawyer. Yeah, that's a really good question, and that really highlights how often this kind of stuff happens. Do you have anything else to say, Kanan?
I was just gonna say that the whole situation when you brought up like a power structure or like I don't know if that's how you phrase it, but when you brought that up, it made me think of that because like I mean like looking at it like she gave up a full ride to the University of Miami and stuff to be with this person too. So it was like
Yeah,
a lot of life changing implications that happened because I knew this person personally and
yeah,
it was a big thing that I feel nothing ever happened with when I feel like something should have happened. Like the guy didn't even get
yeah,
fired. He still lived there.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is really messed up. Yeah, and it exists and it is in our society. I went to high school with a guy that was a couple years younger than me that wound up becoming a substitute teacher. And then he was fired because he was trying to seduce he was trying to seduce students via Facebook. And we all knew that guy was a creep the whole time. I went to school with him. Everyone thought he was a creep, and then he wound up being a creep too. Um, yeah, and I said the whole time they never should have let him anywhere near teenagers because he was a textbook sociopath. Yeah, yeah. Cool. I think I may include a little bit more discussion in this stuff in future iterations of the class because there definitely is. Most of us have these stories. Most of us definitely have these stories. Okay, I'm gonna move on though. Molesters typically are unmarried and they often suffer from what's called avoidant personality disorder. Avoidant personality disorder is when an individual has low self esteem and avoids social interaction where they could be criticized. Um, Avoidant personality disorder is a pretty common psychological disorder. So about 1% of the population has that disorder. So that doesn't make it as common as, say, anxiety disorder or as depression, but 1% of the population is a lot of people. Among those people with avoidant personality disorders, a very small percentage of those people actually become child molesters. And most people with avoidant personality disorder have no inclination to do that whatsoever. That disorder is a factor in being at risk of becoming a molester, but not the only factor. Most molesters tend to be male, and in other aspects, they differ considerably from people who commit sexual assault. They tend to be over the age of 35. Most other active criminals tend to be under the age of 30, at least when they start committing crime. Molesters tend to be over the age of 35. They tend to appear to be more gentle and more passive than the average person. Again, that goes back to avoidant personality disorder. Molesters tend to be less physically forceful toward victims. They tend to be more coercive. Molesters tend to stop at fondling. So most molesters are content, if you will, by just touching the child or having the child touch them. That is part of the distinction between a molester and a rapist is that behavior. They also tend to keep abusing the same child over a period of time. So very much it's predator type behavior. Do I have that on the next slide? No, I don't. Basically, what happens with most child molesters is that they have one victim or maybe one or two victims, and then after that victim ages out of the taste of the molester, then they effectively choose a new victim and they'll let that other victim go. That's how that often goes down. Most molesters will admit their guilt when they are caught or confronted. This is a interesting phenomena relating to child molesters as to why they actually do that. Other sex criminals tend to deny actually doing it. So most rapists deny, serial rapists deny, incidental rapists deny, child molesters don't. Additionally, male molesters who prey on boys do not typically identify as non-heterosexual, which is an interesting glimpse into the mind of a child molester, is they don't think of themselves as being gay, usually is how they would say it, which is very deeply intriguing, deeply troubling. Molesters were likely molested as children themselves. So we really have a psychological profile of these monsters. It is behavior that is learned and can shape the individual's sexuality, right? So here we see how a very specific type of person comes to be, right? So this kid has avoidant personality disorder. Thus, that kid will not play with other kids. So a molester who knows that they can isolate that kid will choose that kid. Then by traumatizing that child, It then, in some people who are molested, trigger a certain set of behaviors, right? So boy victims are more likely than other boys to grow up to be child molesters themselves. Thus, boys who are molested are at increased risk of becoming child molesters, but it is not inevitable, right? This concept of high risk is super important. And why kids who are victimized or kids who are at high risk for other reasons, maybe because of poverty, it's important to do what social workers call an early intervention, to try to be able to stop something before it goes on into society to create greater problems. Molesters, and this really again focuses in on the predatory nature of molesters, they tend to target and groom their victims in a gradual process. So in the grooming process, they build relationships with vulnerable victims. They will isolate the victim either from their parents or from other children. They will gradually introduce ideas of sexuality to the victims. It is very common for child molesters to show their victims pornography. And then eventually, as I mentioned, as the child ages, the molester will move on to another grooming victim. If you haven't seen it, I strongly suggest seeing it because I suggest everyone seeing it. The Michael Jackson documentary Leaving Neverland, I think. Yeah, it was called Leaving Neverland. It came out, I believe, in 2020, and it shows, from my perspective, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Michael Jackson was a predator. He absolutely was a predator. And in knowing this phenomena, in knowing what predators look like, it's very clear that's what was happening. So that's another thing you can look at, but don't look at it when you absolutely don't want your day to be ruined, because it is way darker than this presentation is, and this presentation is pretty damn dark. 1 second. Oh yeah, so sexual predators often seek positions in society that will give them access to their victims. And is, again, another behavior on behalf of sexual predators. The Catholic Church, it has become notorious for this problem, but it absolutely extends beyond religious organizations or denominations. It's not just the Catholics. This is present in other churches as well. This has occurred in all sorts of Protestant denominations, non-denominational denominations, all that stuff, other religions. It's because of the way that predators behave and act and will put themselves in these organizations. Pedophiles act effectively when they know they can isolate powerless victims. They know what the kind of kid is that they can take advantage of. And this is why we find sexual predators as teacher and as clergy, and why those institutions must be especially vigilant in rooting out sexual predators. It's effectively, please excuse the example, it's effectively like defense in a sport, or protecting, like in war, right? You know the enemy will try to find themselves in there. You have to keep that from happening and be hyper vigilant, even in schools where people say, well, it couldn't happen here. It absolutely can. That's part of the nature of the problem. So let's talk about some things we can do to try to stop sexual violence. So survivors of any sexual violence continue suffering after the assault is over. Most victims will go through 2 phases of disorganization. The first phase is the immediate phase right after it happened, It will respond in extreme fear, in psychological shock, maybe depending on the actual assault, physical shock, feelings of humiliation, self blame, and anxiety. These are all completely normal feelings for someone who has been traumatized like this to feel. Phase two tends to be longer lingering and just a general sense of disorganization for a prolonged period of time. This can involve developing phobias of things that weren't phobias in the past, often things that are associated with the assault, and it can also involve traumatic dreams. The individual may develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder actually is coming to be much better understood in society today. A lot of people have some form of PTSD, and as well as other long-term psychological conditions, including but not limited to depression, anxiety, body image issues, those sorts of things. People who were molested as children often exhibit these symptoms. Those who were molested may not remember the actual incident. That is a big problem in trying to help people psychologically. I actually have friends that, through working with psychiatrists, are pretty sure that they actually were molested, but they have no actual memory of the thing actually happening, even though they have all of the psychological and physical symptoms of that. So age is a major impact there. A lot of little kids, memory isn't really concrete until about the age of 5. That's why a lot of us, our first memories are actually of preschool and kindergarten, because that's when our memories are starting to actually function. Additionally, those who were molested might block out the memory, or kids remember what they understand, right? So if they don't understand sexuality in any way, then maybe they got lucky and maybe they weren't actually traumatized by it. They might just not remember it at all, which is, yeah. People who were molested. So kids who were molested tend to have these symptoms. So again, PTSD. A kid who's molested may exhibit behavior problems, especially at school. This is a big indicator, is sexualized behavior or a knowledge of sex beyond the experience and what is age appropriate. And this even extends beyond. We do live in an era where pornography is on computers, right? But there are certain knowledges of sex that when, say, an 8-year-old is expressing that stuff or saying things or that sort of thing, it's a very good indicator. And that is something mandated reporters absolutely keep an eye out for. Poor self-esteem can also be a symptom of very poor self-esteem. And poor self-esteem is something a lot of kids have, but when it's in constellation with this other stuff. And then also criminal deviance. A large percentage of female prison inmates were molested as children and teens. And as I mentioned, girls are more likely to be molested than boys are to be molested. So again, that plays into the whole concepts of patriarchy in our society. The best way we can stop sexual violence in our society is to believe people when they say that they have been victims. This is an ongoing issue with police insensitivity and court or jury bias in terms of getting convictions in rape cases. Additionally, it is hard to get many victims to actually testify against their rapists because it forces them to relive that trauma, right? And victims often, additionally, then engage in reflexive human behaviors that complicate investigations. This includes things like bathing after the assault, burning clothes, destroying evidence because they don't want to see it, right? That's all intensely understandable from a psychological standpoint, but it makes an actual criminal investigation very, very difficult. And additionally, when this kind of trauma happens to a person, there is a tendency to both physically hide and socially hide the crime, and to not report the crime because they don't want to hear anything about it ever again, right? These are all behaviors that make it super critical that when victims are vocal like that and willing to be vocal, that it's super important that we believe them. As a society, as we become more understanding of sexual assault survivors, the criminal justice system has become better at helping to help rape survivors. Honest to goodness, I think that Law and Order SVU has been a very good force for good in society in showing people a lot of the messed up ways we think about sexual assault. Victims have been accused of lying, right? And of course, a rapist will accuse the person that they rape of lying. And of course, the mother of the rapist will defend her son, right? But I mean, we as a society have to believe the victims, because the question must be asked in these cases: why would anybody ever lie about something like that, right? Why on earth would anybody lie about something as horrifying as rape, right? Especially when we take into account that the victims of the rape are more likely to be stigmatized by people that they know and by their friends than the actual rapists are, right? Because a rapist's friend will stick by the rapist, while a victim's friends, maybe they don't want to deal with that, right? So it's important to support people when they come forward like this. To be sure, and of course, after this lecture, it is entirely understandable for you to be very concerned about sexual consent. When you are trying to determine sexual consent, smiling, nodding, eye contact, looking relaxed and happy and ready for actual sexual contact. These are all signs of consent. Kissing and touching back, engaging in the activity, heavy breathing, moaning, telling you that they like the act. When in doubt, ask the person. These are all good. They say it feels good. They say don't stop, all that sort of thing. Enthusiastic consent is not silence or no response at all. Maybe stiff body language, maybe avoiding eye contact or not touching back or not fully participating. A yes only after you have pressured them to have sex. So if you make that mistake to accidentally pressure somebody, be aware of that. A yes from someone who's intoxicated. Don't mix those things, especially with somebody you've just met, right? There are some really good resources that I found in researching this particular presentation, and those resources are available at the bottom of the slide. So let's look at the work that's due this week. That's the end of the presentation itself. So in this discussion, I want you to go back to the family that you chose to examine on the midterm exam. So let's put ourselves in this hypothetical. So over the course of your attempt to help that family that you tried to help on the midterm exam, you come to the belief that either one of the parents or one of the children are being the subject of sexual abuse in the family. How do you go about helping that family? What specific people or agencies do you inform or intentionally not inform in the situation? What are you going to do? How are you going to go about doing it? when you're doing this discussion, and I admit this is a tough subject, if you wish, you may select a different family from the family that you chose on your midterm. If you want to do a different one, that's fine. But if you've already put some thought into that midterm family, that's fine to do that too. You can make up hypothetical situations for what happened in that family dynamic. Just make up stuff. That's okay because it is a hypothetical. What I really want to see here, though, is you engaging in what would you do in that situation? How would you try to help them? And then also this week, quiz 13, which is on chapter 12, is also due. So, are there any questions before we are done with tonight's class? Okay. If anything comes up, please let me know. If you need any guidance with this lecture, I will attempt to monitor my email relatively well. I will say that I am going out of town this weekend. I do anticipate having internet access, but one never does know when using an access point that you're not familiar with. But yeah, that's it for tonight. And thank you for putting yourself through this. See you guys later.